Alright, so right off the bat, spoiler warning for all of Shovel Knight. All 3 campaigns. I'm gonna be spoiling the heck out of all of them, so if you haven't played them, go fix that right now. So by now, the quality of Shovel Knight is practically undisputed. A critical success since its release, and a commercial success even before that. Shovel Knight holds up against and even surpasses the games that inspired it. And there's still one more free DLC yet to come. In short, Shovel Knight rules. But, which campaign rules the most? Well, that's what this video is about. And before we even start, disclaimer, all of them are pretty fantastic. This is going to be like choosing a favorite child. And perhaps it's not even right to call this the best campaign. My favorite is more appropriate because in the end, my personal preferences are going to come into play and there's no way to avoid that. I'll be looking at the story, music, and gameplay of each campaign and ranking them. One thing that's on a lot of lists about games that I won't be talking about here is graphics, since the campaigns are pretty much identical in terms of graphical fidelity, and really only differ in some aesthetic senses. Shovel Knight is bright, Specter Knight is dark, Plague Knight is green. To me, they're all 10 out of 10 A+ perfect scores in the graphics department, so no need to rank them on that. With all of that being said, let's start with the story. Coming in 3rd place for story is Specter of Torment. This one will come as a surprise to many, I'm sure, but I'm putting Specter of Torment at number 3 for story. Like I said at the beginning, and I'm gonna sound like a broken record pretty soon, 3rd place does not mean bad, and Specter Knight's story is by no means bad. In fact, it's probably the most complex of the 3. As a prequel to Shovel Knight's story, Specter of Torment tells the tale of how the Enchantress gathered her Order of No Quarter using Specter Knight. As far as premises go, this one's not exactly the strongest. I never really wondered how or why they all joined the Enchantress, so Specter of Torment loses a few points there. But to its credit, it does mostly come through in the execution. Flashbacks tell the story of Specter Knight, then called Donovan, before being enslaved by the Enchantress, hunting after an artifact with his friend Lewin. These sections are great at showing how Donovan and Lewin work together, and they make you feel really attached to Lewin. But then Donovan betrays him, seemingly for no good reason. And the twist at the end that Rhys is Lewin's son and Specter Knight lets himself be enslaved by the Enchantress to save Rhys because he promised Lewin that he would protect him, well, it all just felt a little contrived and more than a little confusing. Specter of Torment certainly gets the job done in the story department, but didn't really work for me in the same way that the other characters' stories did. In 2nd place is Plague of Shadows. So, I consider myself a manly man. I've got a beard, I drive a stick shift, I pick my nose and grunt a lot. You know, manly stuff. But sometimes all I want is a cute little love story, and Plague of Shadows gave me just that. It's not as complex or dark as Specter of Torment's story, but it made me feel more. The overarching story is tied in nicely to Plague Knight's personal struggle. He wants to fight all the other knights to get their essence and brew the ultimate potion so he'll be worthy of Mona's love. He really just wants to prove himself. And Plague Knight's fear of rejection and shyness in front of Mona is endearing and intensely relatable to anyone who's ever had a crush. And I mean, come on, just look at him. This guy wears a creepy 17th century plague mask and throws bombs everywhere, and he is the absolute cutest thing in this game. This screen of Plague Knight and Mona dancing warms my heart every time I see it. And that's why Plague Knight's story takes 2nd place. And in 1st place, we have Shovel of Hope. I think I hold Shovel Knight's story in such high regard because it surprised me the most. Not the twist that the Enchantress is Shield Knight, that one I think a lot of people saw coming. No, it surprised me with how much it made me care about the characters. Shovel Knight wins here partially because it came first, but mostly because it weaves the story and gameplay together perfectly. The story is the simplest of the 3. Shovel Knight rescues Shield Knight, but it managed to make me care about their relationship so much while giving Shield Knight maybe 10 minutes of screen time at the very end of the game. But that's because we don't just get told about their relationship in a text box, we get to see and experience it for ourselves in the final boss fight. Shovel Knight, and by extension the player, absolutely needs Shield Knight in the final fight to help him attack the boss and to protect him from otherwise undodgeable attacks. These few minutes are game storytelling at its absolute best. Shovel of Hope story takes first place. And next up, we're going to be talking about the music. Coming in at third place is Plague Knight. Plague Knight unfortunately scores low here basically by process of elimination. It adds 10 brand new songs, and if this were any other game, that much new music in a free DLC would be pretty incredible. Unfortunately, Plague Knight's 10 new tracks can't quite measure up to Specter Knight's 25 new tracks, and that 10 absolutely pales in comparison to Shovel Knight's original 48, most of which are reused in Plague Knight. The new tracks are good, as you'd expect, but you don't get to hear most of them very often, so I can't even hum any off the top of my head. Plague Knight takes last here, but really only because, well, Specter and Shovel Knight tie. Call it a cop-out, I call it the only fair way to do this. Shovel Knight came out years ago with a stunning soundtrack that to me has only since been matched by Undertale. Specter of Torment took all of the main level tracks, remixed them, and added in a few stellar new songs. Most of the remixed songs, Iron Whale, Flying Machine, Clockwork Tower, and especially the theme for the Lich Yard, the new elements they added really enhanced the song. A few other remixes, like Lost City, feel like they sort of add unnecessary bloat to songs that were pretty much already perfect. But really, just think about what Specter of Torment's soundtrack is. Jake Kaufman remixed basically an entire soundtrack, giving each song an entirely new feel while still retaining the same melody, making every song feel new and fresh, but familiar and instantly recognizable. The fact that Jake Kaufman not only pulled that off, but did so using a soundtrack that I would argue was pretty much already perfect, is reason enough to put Specter of Torment's soundtrack on par with Shovel of Hope's. And of my two favorite songs in the entire game, one is the haunting and intense theme from the Lich Yard from Specter of Torment, and the other is the woefully underappreciated The Defender from Shovel of Hope. I'm sorry guys, I really can't decide here. Specter and Shovel Knight both win here. And finally, we'll talk about the gameplay. Coming in at third place is Plague of Shadows. So it probably must seem like I just hate Plague of Shadows, but again, Plague of Shadows is a great game. It just didn't grab me the way the others did. The new mechanics take some time to get used to, and Plague Knight's health, items, and attacks work completely differently from what the player is probably used to after playing Shovel Knight's campaign. But these are all good things. The fact that you can customize your basic attacks is really cool, and the triple jump mechanic is super fun to use and takes a lot of practice to master. However, I have a couple of gripes that prevent Plague Knight from ranking higher. His basic attacks have a lot of customization options, but I found that in most situations, I didn't need any of the weirder bomb types, fuses, or casings. I just used one or two loadouts for pretty much the entire game. Plus, and this is a personal preference thing, throwing bombs from a distance is not really as fun as getting up close and personal with enemies. And speaking of getting up close and personal, Shovel Knight's simple, bouncy gameplay is a nearly perfect blend of classic NES games like Castlevania, Mega Man, DuckTales, and Mario, with modern conveniences as well as completely unique twists added in. There's an inherent fun to bouncing on enemies, and this system takes the concept of easy to learn, difficult to master to new heights. Every single level contains at least 2 unique gimmicks, and each one actually changes how you play the game, how you think about and approach challenges and enemies, how you view the world around you. It's absolutely brilliant. However, if I had to complain, and I do, then I would say that, like Plague of Shadows, most of the special items are underpowered, with one lone exception. That's right, the Phase Locket, which makes you completely invincible and still allows you to attack. This item, along with the Smoke Bomb and Plague of Shadows, absolutely cripples most bosses and sucks quite a bit of challenge out of the game. All of that said, Shovel Knight's gameplay is still nothing short of fantastic. However, Specter of Torment wins gameplay. For me, this was the easiest choice. Plague Knight's bombs were a fun little twist, Shovel Knight's bouncy shovel is a tried and true classic, but Specter Knight's wall running and dash slash ability are revelations. I have not played a game like this, well, ever. Specter Knight's abilities work so perfectly together to make a movement system that takes time and practice to learn, rewards mastery, allows for mistakes, and can be used by the designers to make a ton of different challenges. Like the others, Specter of Torment's gameplay is not perfect, and like the others, the special items, here called curios, are very underused. The difference here is that Specter Knight doesn't have a phase locket. Okay, yeah, he does literally have the phase locket, but I mean he doesn't have an item that completely negates half of the game's challenge. The closest thing is maybe the Will Skull or the Hover Plume, which can both make the game easier, but I still hardly used them. Unlike the phase locket, which I ended up relying on for significant portions of the Shovel Knight campaign. Here's the real difference. With Shovel Knight and Plague Knight, I hardly used any items except for the invincibility items. With Specter Knight, I hardly used any items, period. Specter Knight just feels strong enough without any of the items. They're all very situational, which is how I feel they should be. Nothing is universally useful, except maybe the Will Skull, which I did use occasionally, but all that does is restore health. It doesn't completely gimp boss fights. And though I will freely admit that Specter Knight has problems, the other campaigns have problems in the exact same ways, and Specter Knight's gameplay was just the deepest and the most fun for me. So, now that we've ranked each campaign on my criteria, the winner is clearly not Plague Knight's campaign. Sorry, little guy. I love you, but just not as much as the other guys. So that leaves Specter and Shovel Knight each with 1 win and a tie. So that means we'll have to dive into the super secret tiebreaker round, where I'll do a deep analysis and scientifically measure which game is truly the greatest one, and I will decide once and for all Specter Knight wins. Yeah, sorry if that's anticlimactic, but yeah, there was really never any doubt in my mind that Specter Knight would be winning this. Because at the end of the day, what is Shovel Knight? It's not a book, it's not an album, it's not a movie, it's a game. Story, music, and graphics are all important, but at the end of the day, they exist to serve and enhance gameplay. And to me, Specter Knight's slashing, dashing, wall-running gameplay is simply the deepest, most challenging, most fun gameplay experience I've had in a long time. If you haven't played Shovel Knight, fix that immediately. Play each campaign for sure, but really savor Specter of Torment. Yacht Club Games have made something truly amazing with Shovel Knight, and I can't wait to see what they come up with next. King Knight, the ball's in your court. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you like this video, subscribe, share, comment, etc. Do the YouTube things, and I'll see you next time.